I was 2 weeks out from finals, living off caffeine and ramen when I threw up during my morning lecture. I barely made it out of the room before I hit the hallway trash can. Everyone stared. I blamed the stress. Maybe food poisoning. I'd never had the flu, but it had to be something simple. I didn't drink. I didn't party. I was laser focused on getting my psych degree. What I definitely wasn't was pregnant. But 3 days later, after the nausea kept coming in waves, and I nearly fainted while tutoring in the library, my roommate insisted I go to the clinic. I rolled my eyes and went, expecting a scolding about iron or hydration. The nurse asked the usual questions. When was your last period? I said I'd been irregular for a while, no big deal. She asked about sexual activity. I laughed. None, I said. I'm a virgin. She gave me a look I didn't like. One of those sure honey smiles. She ran a urine test anyway. Then another. Then a blood draw. I waited in that freezing paper gown for nearly an hour before the doctor finally came in. He sat down with the chart in his lap and looked at me like I was some skittish animal. You're about 8 weeks along, he said gently. I laughed. I think you have the wrong file. But he didn't. He showed me the labs. My HCG levels were high, blood pressure slightly elevated. He said my uterus was consistent with early gestation. His tone was calm, careful, like he was trying not to spook me. I've never had sex, I told him. My mouth was dry. Sometimes patients forget encounters or minimize them, especially under stress. I stood up. I'm not lying. I've never had sex. Not even once. He didn't argue, just handed me a referral and told me to follow up with an OB/GYN. By the time I got home, I was shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice at the door. I told my mom first. Oh, her silence on the other end of the phone lasted a full minute. Then she asked, "Are you sure you're telling me everything?" I wasn't angry yet, just stunned. "Mom, I swear." She told me to come home that weekend. We'd talk it through like it was a phase, a mistake I was afraid to admit. Then I told Patty, my boyfriend, of almost 2 years. We talked about waiting until we graduated. He said he respected that. I believed him. Maybe you don't remember? He said, his voice cautious, like he was choosing every word carefully, like sleepwalking, or maybe something happened when you were out? I don't drink, I said again. And I don't sleepwalk. He didn't say anything after that. Just mumbled something about needing time. Within 48 hours, I felt like I was living in a vacuum. My roommate wouldn't look me in the eye. My advisor canceled our standing meeting. My mother started texting me links to faith-based pregnancy support. I went back to the OB/GYN clinic. They ran another round of tests. Confirmed the pregnancy again. Nothing abnormal in the scans, just a small, healthy fetus, already with a fluttering heartbeat. They offered me a counselor. I declined. I wasn't in denial. I was being railroaded. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't lying. But no one believed me, so I started documenting everything. My food, my sleep, my meds. I downloaded a journaling app and voice memo recorder. I bought a GoPro and stuck it to the ceiling in my room. I saved every medical file, printed charts, logged every minute I was awake. If no one else believed me, I'd believe myself. I'd build a timeline, a map, a case, something to prove I wasn't insane. Because the thing growing inside me was real, and I had no idea where it came from. The walls of my life started closing in faster than I could push them back. Patty stopped answering my texts completely. After 3 days of silence, he finally sent one message. I love you, but I can't do this. I need space. My mom cried on the phone, then got angry. She said I was embarrassing her, that I had clearly done something I was ashamed of and was now making it worse by lying. You used to be such a good girl. She whispered like I'd died, and she was mourning. The clinic sent over a packet of prenatal resources and a pamphlet on how to come to terms with unexpected pregnancy. I threw it in the trash. Even my professors who used to love me started acting weird. One of them pulled me aside after class and said, "I just want to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Your situation might be affecting your focus." I nodded blankly. I was still acing every exam, but none of that seemed to matter anymore. Then came the day I was out walking to grab a sandwich between lectures, earbuds in, hoodie up, head down, and a guy I'd never seen before tapped my shoulder. "You don't have to run from me anymore," he said. "I've been trying to talk to you for weeks." I froze. "Do I know you?" He smiled like it was some kind of joke between us. "You know me better than anyone. It's my baby, too." I stared at him. "What?" "I won't fight you. You don't have to be scared. I just want to be part of their life." My legs locked. "Who the hell are you?" He said his name was Devin, and then he said something about a night we spent together back in July. I told him I wasn't even in town in July. I had been home with my mom all month. I pulled out my phone and opened my Google timeline to show him every location I'd visited that summer. He laughed. "You don't have to play dumb, sweetheart. I've got screenshots." I ran. The next day, a social worker came to my dorm. Not a knock, not a letter. She just showed up. She said there'd been a report filed questioning my mental state, that I'd been endangering myself and possibly the fetus by refusing to accept reality. "I haven't done anything," I snapped. She stayed calm, but I could see it in her eyes. That look. I was just another uncooperative client in her caseload. Later that week, my job at the campus tutoring center called me into the office. My manager said a parent had complained after overhearing that I was unstable, that I'd cursed out a male student, which wasn't true. He asked me to take a leave of absence for now. No pay, no support, just go. I sat on the curb outside the building and cried until I couldn't breathe. I couldn't prove a negative. I couldn't prove I hadn't had sex. And somehow, that made me guilty in everyone's eyes. The only person who treated me like I wasn't a lunatic was Gianna, a paralegal who worked at a local women's legal center. I found her online, buried under a dozen Reddit threads about false accusations and reproductive rights. She picked up on the first ring. She listened. Actually listened. Then said, "You need to start protecting yourself legally. This is already a case, even if no one's said it yet." We met in a park 2 days later. I brought a binder, color-coded, of all my documentation. She said she believed me. And that made me cry all over again, right there on a bench under a sycamore tree. I started recording everything. Phone calls, visits, even myself at night. I set up cameras facing the front door and the hallway. I reviewed every frame every morning. That's when I noticed something. My dad. He started visiting more often, staying late, offering to help. He brought groceries, asked if I needed anything, said he just wanted to make sure I was okay. At first, it felt sweet, protective. But then, something shifted. I caught him standing in the nursery corner I'd set up, just staring. Not touching, not smiling, just standing there, blank-faced, looking at the wall. Another night, I woke up to the sound of him whispering. I checked the hallway camera. He was in the baby's room again, speaking softly into the empty air. I didn't confront him. Not yet, but I saved the clip. Whatever this was, whatever was happening to me, it wasn't just biology. And I had a feeling my dad knew more than he was letting on. Dad started coming by almost every day after that. He said he wanted to help me keep up with things. Groceries, laundry, bills. At first, I was grateful. But then, small things started to feel off. He kept bringing me food I didn't like. Weird, bland soups or things I hadn't eaten since I was a kid. When I told him that, he'd just smile and say, "You used to love this when you were little. Thought the baby might too." The baby. He never said your baby. Just the baby. One night, I caught him rummaging through my medicine cabinet. He said he was looking for aspirin, but he'd opened the drawer where I kept my prenatal vitamins and the test results. He froze when I walked in, like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "Dad," I said, crossing my arms. "What are you doing?" He stammered something about just wanting to make sure I was taking care of myself. Then he left early. After that, I started paying closer attention. The GoPro footage showed him sitting alone in the nursery chair sometimes, not even moving, just whispering. It was faint, but I could make out a few words. "You look just like him. It's almost time." Him who? I confronted him the next morning. I told him I'd been recording everything and that I'd seen him. He didn't deny it, but he didn't explain either. His face just went pale. "Some things are better left buried," he said quietly. "What things?" He sighed. "You wouldn't understand. Not yet. You don't remember your grandfather, do you?" I frowned. "You've never shown me pictures. You always said he died before I was born." He hesitated, then nodded. "He did. Sort of." "Sort of?" I repeated, my stomach tightening. He wasn't an easy man to explain. He had ideas, beliefs about bloodlines and purity that I wanted no part of. I thought I'd escaped all that when I had you. He looked at me then. Really looked. Maybe I didn't. I demanded details, but he just shook his head and muttered something about needing time. That night, I found him outside on the porch, staring into the dark. His phone lit up with a message from a contact named R. Just the letter. I caught a glimpse before he could lock it. The message read, "Any signs yet?" The next day, he acted like nothing had happened. But when he went out for groceries, I searched the house. In the bottom of one of his duffel bags, under clothes and tools, I found an old photo. It was faded and sepia-toned, probably taken in the 1960s. There was a woman standing in a hospital gown, holding a baby. Beside her stood a man with my father's exact eyes. On the back in shaky handwriting, it said, "Margaret and the Second Miracle." My hands shook as I slid the photo back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I heard him pacing in the hallway, whispering again. I turned the volume up on the footage later, trying to make out the words. "Not again. Please, you're not again." The next morning, I told him I needed the truth. Oh, he looked exhausted. His voice trembled. "There are things in our family you wouldn't believe, even if I told you. It's not what you think. It's worse. But I can't tell you everything. Not yet." I didn't blink. "You'd better start." He put his face in his hands. "It's happening again," he said. "Just like before." And before I could ask what that meant, he walked out. He didn't come back for 3 days. When Dad finally returned, he looked like he hadn't slept the entire time he was gone. His hair was greasy, eyes bloodshot, and he smelled like gas station coffee and sweat. He handed me a bag of groceries like nothing had happened. I didn't ask where he'd been. I just took the bag and placed it on the counter, watching him with one eye while I unpacked cans of chickpeas and jars of baby food I hadn't asked for. I was tired of screaming into silence. The next week was a blur of strangers in suits, white coats, and ID lanyards. The social worker brought in a child psychologist to assess prenatal bonding, whatever that meant. A pediatric geneticist from the university hospital requested blood samples. And then, out of nowhere, the baby spiked a fever. It started with restlessness. He wouldn't stop moving inside me. Then came the heat, spreading up my spine, down my legs. I felt like I was burning from the inside out. I rushed to the ER. They hooked me up to monitors and IV fluids, and within an hour, I was surrounded by doctors. A specialist asked if I'd been exposed to any radiation. Another asked about travel to Africa. Then came the ultrasound. The tech's face twisted slightly when she saw the screen. She called in a colleague, then a third. I kept asking what was wrong. No one answered directly. Finally, a woman from the genetics team named Dr. Gianna came in and gently explained that my baby's cell activity was unusual. Not dangerous, not alien, just fast. Rapid development, almost like a time lapse. He's still human, she assured me. But there are markers we don't usually see at this stage. It's not a mutation per se. It might be an adaptation. Adaptation to what? I asked. She smiled, but there was tension in her jaw. That's what we're trying to understand. The baby stabilized after a few hours and they discharged me with more tests scheduled. I went home with a new kind of fear, not what is happening to me, but what is growing inside me. Later that week, I met again with Gianna in private. She said she believed me, not just about the pregnancy, about everything. She'd seen a case like mine before years ago, sealed under medical confidentiality agreements. She was also adamant she was a virgin, Gianna told me. Everyone assumed she was either lying or delusional, but the tests backed her up. To this day, no one's published her file. I asked what happened to her. She moved away, changed her name, raised the child in secret. I asked if she still had contact. Gianna shook her head. She cut ties with everyone, said the child was different. Not dangerous. Just not meant for this world. I didn't sleep that night, but I also didn't feel helpless anymore. I poured myself into documentation. I built folders, spreadsheets, time logs. I set alarms every hour to note symptoms. I wore a heart monitor. I contacted a women's health lawyer about workplace discrimination. I even printed out the ultrasound anomalies and stuck them to my wall next to lab reports and timelines. My dorm room looked like a detective's war board. I posted anonymously in a private women's health forum and got messages from 2 other women who'd experienced something eerily similar. Rapid fetal development, strange genetics, unexplained conception. Both had been silenced or pressured into termination. One wrote, "Don't let them own your story. You're not crazy, you're not alone." That message lit something in me. I realized I didn't want to just survive this. I wanted to fight. Whatever was happening, and whether it was trauma, science, or some deeply buried family truth, I would face it head on my terms. By the time my 3rd trimester rolled around, my life looked like evidence in an ongoing investigation, because that's exactly what it was. I had binders stacked like towers, each labeled medical, legal, paternity, surveillance. Every photo, lab result, voicemail, and witness statement was indexed. I wasn't a college student anymore. I was a one-woman case file. Gianna became my lifeline. She checked in weekly, updating me on the DNA sequencing. "We've confirmed there's no genetic anomaly on your side," she said one night over Zoom. "We're still analyzing paternal markers." Her phrasing stuck with me. Paternal markers. I had none to compare to. Meanwhile, that man, Devin, the stranger who claimed to be the father, kept showing up online. Fake profiles, new usernames, commenting on posts about me. Tell the truth. We had something special. She's pretending she doesn't remember. Gianna connected the dots. He'd done this before. 2 other women had filed restraining orders against him for the same pattern. Faking relationships, inserting himself into pregnancies he had nothing to do with. Knowing that gave me a rush of vindication, but it didn't stop the fear. At work, my case for wrongful leave was gaining traction. My attorney, a fierce woman named Denise, said, "We're going after them for discrimination, emotional distress, and defamation." It sounded powerful, but I was exhausted. Every day was a balancing act between panic and numbness. My mom barely spoke to me. My father still stayed over, though he avoided eye contact most nights. Sometimes I'd wake up to him standing outside my door, just listening. I started locking it. Then, one Friday morning, the results finally came in. Gianna called, voice buzzing with excitement and tension. "No anomalies in your genome. None in the mitochondrial line either," she said. "Whatever's different, it's coming from the other half." "So the father," I said quietly. "Yeah, but that's the strange part. We don't have a match yet. It's not in the database." That sentence hung between us like a storm cloud. She promised to keep digging. Meanwhile, my lawsuit started moving forward. HR emails turned apologetic. Patty's lawyer reached out for a statement, which I ignored. My story was gaining traction in whispers, forums, small blogs, even local reporters sniffing around. I told Gianna I wanted control of the narrative before anyone else twisted it. She said, "Then you need to document your truth, all of it, before they frame it for you." So I did. I recorded a full video diary, everything from the first clinic visit to the latest lab report. I spoke directly to the camera, voice shaking but firm. I said my name, my age, my disbelief, my fear, my hope. I wasn't hiding anymore. When the harassment got worse, Denise filed for a restraining order against Devin. We also opened a discrimination case against my employer and a complaint against the first doctor who implied I was delusional. It felt good to fight back. It felt even better when other women started emailing me, some local, some overseas. One said she'd been dismissed by doctors after claiming conception without intercourse. Another said she'd been institutionalized for it. I realized I wasn't an anomaly. I was part of a pattern. I started joining online meetings for women in medical legal battles. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. I was scared, yes. But beneath that fear was something new. Resolve. Because soon, I'd have real answers. And whoever had doubted me, whoever had whispered, accused, or turned away, would have to face the truth. I almost didn't open the envelope. It was a thick manila folder from the university's genetics lab, stamped with confidential in red ink. My name typed neatly in the corner. I stared at it for a full 5 minutes before I worked up the courage to tear the seal. Inside were 2 sheets of paper and a note from Gianna. The first page was the summary. Paternity result, 99.9% match. Patrick J. Wallace Patty. I stared at the page trying to process the words. The math. The impossibility. We'd never had sex. Not even once. We'd kissed, cuddled, fooled around, but we always stopped before it went too far. That was our deal. He respected my boundaries. I trusted him. I called Gianna in a full-blown panic, the paper shaking in my hand. I thought the DNA wasn't matching anyone. I gasped. You said, "We got a secondary database hit late last night," she interrupted gently. I double-checked. It's valid. But how? I asked. Patty and I never. She was quiet a moment. Then, it's rare. But there have been documented cases. It's called superfecundation or splash conception. Oh, it usually happens with twins from different fathers, but in incredibly rare instances, even minimal contact, like unprotected external contact, can result in pregnancy, especially if pre-ejaculate contains viable sperm. My world tilted. I remembered one night, early summer. We were drunk on root beer floats and graduation nerves. Things had gotten heated. We hadn't gone all the way, but we'd gotten close. He swore he hadn't. But he'd been unprotected, and I hadn't thought twice. It was one of the only times we let our guard down. One moment of blurred boundaries. And that was all it took. I couldn't tell if I was relieved or devastated. On one hand, the mystery was solved. No conspiracy, no supernatural explanation. Just a scientific freak event, a medical anomaly. On the other hand, the damage was done. My life had been torn apart by something this explainable. I called Patty. He picked up after one ring. I told him everything. He went silent. Then he asked me to forward the documents. I didn't know, he whispered. I swear to God I didn't know. I believe you, I said. He came over that night for the first time in months. We didn't talk much. He cried. I did too. I messed up, he kept repeating. But I didn't think. How could anyone think? I know. I looked at him. I need space, but I also need support. I'm not asking you to come back. Just help. He nodded, said he'd start child support paperwork immediately, offered to help with delivery costs, said he'd be there, really be there, for the baby. I let him hold one of the ultrasound prints. He stared at it for a long time. That's Mine, he said softly. He's mine. He left that night with red eyes and trembling hands. But something between us had settled. Not love, not romance, just truth. When I told my dad, he nodded. Not surprised, not skeptical. I figured, he said. You knew? I suspected. You always think it's some grand secret, some family curse. But sometimes the answers are as boring and brutal as science. Then what was all the whispering, the secrecy? He looked down. Because I've seen what this kind of thing can do to people. When the truth's too strange, even if it's real, people would rather call it madness. I couldn't argue with that. At least now I had proof. For social services, for the courts, for the gossip blogs and forums. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't lying. I was a statistical miracle, a mother. It's strange how quickly life settles after a storm, how silence feels louder when you're finally safe. Social services closed my case 2 weeks before my due date. The investigator shook my hand and apologized for the confusion, like I'd just been misfiled at the DMV instead of nearly institutionalized. My workplace settled my discrimination suit quietly, offering a check that covered nearly a year's rent and tuition. It didn't erase what they did, but it gave me something I hadn't had in months: control. Patty stayed true to his word. He started showing up to appointments, paid for a new crib, and even attended birthing classes. We were never the same, and maybe we never would be, but we were co-parents, partners in responsibility, if not in romance. And then there was my dad. A week before my due date, he sat me down in the kitchen. No cameras, no whispering. Just him, holding a folded piece of paper and a mug of black coffee. I need to tell you something, he said, his voice thick. Oh, he handed me the photo I'd found months earlier, the woman labeled Margaret and her newborn, standing next to a man with eyes just like mine. That's your grandmother, he said. And that's me. I stared at him. I thought you said you were born in a hospital. I was, but they didn't know who the father was. My breath caught. Margaret was 17, he continued. She swore she'd never had sex. They called her crazy. She disappeared for a few months. Came back with me in her arms. I tried to speak, but he raised a hand. She spent her life trying to prove she wasn't lying. Kept journals, photos, letters. Nobody listened. Not her parents, not the doctors, not the courts. She lived in that shadow until the day she died. And you? I asked. I tried to run from it. That's why I never talked about her. I thought if I ignored it, it'd die with me. He looked at me, his eyes tired but clear. But now it's happened again. And you deserve the truth. I pressed my hands against my belly. The baby kicked, as if responding. What do you think it means? I whispered. He shook his head. I don't know. Maybe it's just biology being weird. Maybe it's something else, but you're not cursed. You're not broken. You're strong. I cried. For him. For me. For my grandmother, who never got the redemption I now held in my hands. My son was born on a rainy Tuesday at 3:14 a.m. He was perfect. Small, loud, and stubborn, just like me. Patty was there. He cried harder than I did. He cut the cord and held our son like he was holding the world. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I named him Jonah, after the man who was swallowed whole and came back changed. Now I work from home, writing content for medical nonprofits. I spend my nights feeding Jonah and my days emailing women from all over the world who found my story. Some still hide in the shadows. Others are fighting like hell to be believed. I don't blame anyone for doubting me, not anymore. Doubt is easier than belief. Belief requires risk. But I'll never doubt myself again, because I lived it. And I survived. Not just the pregnancy, but the betrayal, the gaslighting, the isolation, the war to own my truth. And now I get to raise a son who will never be taught to silence a woman's story. Not even mine.